G'day everyone. During March, I went for a bit of a trip from Melbourne to Canberra and back. And of course, like all good trips, I went for a bit of a gunsel. Now, the usual way you would travel between Melbourne and Canberra is to stay on the Hume to Yass and then turn towards Canberra. However, if you want to make the most of any chance to see any rail action, if you turn just after Albury and head towards Wagga Wagga up the Olympic Highway, it's your best bet. So after leaving Melbourne in the early hours, it was, well, uneventful, and that's all a part of the train spotting game. You can't win them all. And it wasn't until early afternoon where I'd gotten wind of a Cube service heading towards Junee from Sydney, with QL19 and QL20 on service 1363, which is a containerised grain train heading from Sydney to southern New South Wales. Although this shot was a little bit rushed and I might have stuffed it with the power lines right in the middle of the shot, I was still happy that I managed to catch these locomotives with their indigenous artwork. Moving a few kilometres up the road to Bethungra, I managed to catch a Melbourne-bound XPT with power cars 2000 and 2016. Twenty 2016 is also named the city of Cootamundra, which was fitting as that was bound to be my next stop. Cootamundra is always a great place to visit, as it's where SSR Sutherland Sidings is, which is a depot for heavy locomotive servicing and maintenance, as well as Pacific National also have a facility there. On the stop in at Cootamundra, it was a bit of a hive of activity with a large number of locomotives in the yard, like recently re-gauged B75, 4911, RL301, 4917, 603, and Binalong modified 49 class MM02. As well as that, there were also some 81s and 82s. But I guess the real treat was seeing CLF3, which is currently undergoing a repaint from white to the SSR livery. So I assume we'll get to see this back on the main line again soon. I was then told by a Pacific National employee there was a grain shuttle about to return to Cootamundra from the Parks branch. So I set up at Cootamundra West and waited for it. This shuttle, numbered 3336, was led by 8124 and the last of the 81s built, 8184. After this had passed, I hot-footed it to Binalong, and on the way I did pass a couple of SSR GT46s loading out of Harden, although I couldn't make out the numbers from, well, where they're visible from. At Binalong, I perched up on the footbridge, at the top of the former station, which is now no longer used, but I did know that I would soon be able to see the Sydney-bound XPT here. But to my surprise, I got something else first, 8171 and 8149 on a southbound grain. This also wasn't the last time I'd see 8171 on this trip, but that'll come a little later. Once this had passed, all of about 5 minutes later, ST24 came up with power cars 2009 and 2008. By this time I was thinking I might try and get one more in before heading to the nation's capital. And just out of Goulburn, I managed to catch 8128 and 8233 with service 2122N, an empty garbage train returning to Sydney from Chips Creek. Now with that day done, I spent the weekend in Canberra at the Kaleen Model Railway Exhibition, and that's a video that you can find elsewhere on my channel. So on Monday, I decided to hit the road after taking a quick look around the Queanbeyan railway station, as funnily enough, they have a former Melbourne suburban Hitachi power car there in the park, just near the railway station. Now just before 11 AM, just outside of Binalong, I started the trip back up with quadruple 82s, that being 8220, 8242, 8239 and 8226. And I managed to get in front of them again just out of Harden, where I found some really interesting crossing lights, something this southerner has never noticed before. Once it had passed, I had seen that there was another train coming the other way parked at Harden, so I went back up the road and caught 8149 and 8124. It was then back to Cootamundra, where I'd managed to once again get in front of the quad 82s, but not before seeing 8257 and for the second time in this video 8171, running a shuttle back to Cootamundra. After catching this grainy another time at Cootamundra West, I did decide to pop back into Cootamundra Main, where not much had changed, although C507 was sitting there in its new SSR livery, and I couldn't pass up seeing that. So then it was back on the road to the Rock, where I'd heard there was an SSR grain loading. On the way back, I didn't see much, although there was a Sydney-bound XPT at Harefield, which is between Junee and Wagga Wagga. Now, once at the Rock, I came across BRM1, CLP12 and Decision's flagship locomotive CLP9, and it was crewed by Dan from DCI Rail Images, and he was kind enough to invite me into the cab for a little bit of a look around. And although I would have loved to have stuck around and chased this all the way back to Melbourne, unfortunately we just didn't quite know when it was going to leave. So with that, I jumped back in the car and headed home. So there we go, about a 1,500 kilometre round trip, and it was of course thoroughly worthwhile. So if you did enjoy that video, of course, don't forget to be subscribed so you can keep up to date, because I'm going to hit the road again pretty soon. In the start of May, we're going Melbourne to Sydney for the Rosehill Model Train Show, and of course you know what that means. We're going to be back on the road to, well, chase some more trains, and of course I can't wait. So I guess I'll see you all then. Hooroo!